Before we forget, you mentioned wanting to talk about GLP-1 agonists like OZEPMIC. They're all the rage in the conventional weight loss realm right now. Talk about how you feel about those.
All right, so here's what's interesting. So I was really fortunate. February 2023, I went to a lecture by Dr. William Seeds, who is one of the peptide experts. And it was supposed to be a lecture on GLP-1 agonists and weight loss. And I'd been hearing all this negativity about these and muscle mass loss and everything else. So I was super duper curious. And I go in, I sit in this lecture, and he's starting to talk about first, he goes through all the weight loss stuff and how he does it so there's no muscle mass loss. But then he starts to talk about the other benefits. And one of the big benefits is neuroregeneration. And this was literally supposed to be like an hour breakout. And I think I was there 2.5 hours because I was like, I'm not leaving this guy. I've got to ask him more questions. And the big question was, well, like, would you use this for someone with a traumatic brain injury? He's like, absolutely. I came home and I put my son on it. And the change has been like absolutely dramatic. First of all, because of all the psych meds he had to be on from having a traumatic brain injury and having such an unstable brain, they cause insulin resistance and weight gain. That's all gone. But we use a super low dose and cycle it. And the difference in cognition is dramatic. And so that was super exciting, besides the fact that because of the brain injury, he'd had chronic elevated blood pressure. That got resolved too. And he also broke 13 bones. Well, when you start to dig into these, and I'm going to call them peptides because they're actually peptides, not drugs, right? They're a chain of amino acids with peptide bonds that signal the body to do something, right? And so what they're signaling the body to do is what's so exciting. They can help with reducing overall inflammation. They can help with regeneration. They can help with osteoporosis. They can help with osteoarthritis. They can help with cardiovascular health. So I've started to dig in, like there is so much research on these. And the couple questions I started to ask myself, because I like try to be curious and critically open-minded. And I think the biggest thing I was curious about is like, why is there all this negativity and backlash and shaming around these things? And especially if we've got less than 7% of the population who's metabolically healthy. And I know when someone's dug themselves into a metabolic hole, like you do not get healthy, you don't lose weight to get healthy. You have to get metabolically healthy in order to lose fat and build muscle. Like we've got it wrong. And if someone's super metabolically unhealthy and very insulin resistant, it is really hard to shift. And if you've got something that could make a difference and help them out, why are we shaming people? So that was my head scratching curiosity. And of course you hear all these side effects. But I thought, why are these working? Could it be that we've messed up our guts and we're GLP-1 deficient? And if so, why would that be? Well, there's research actually showing this, that when you are obese, when you are insulin resistant, when you have fatty liver, of which 25% of the population now has non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is unbelievable. And most people don't know they have it because you wouldn't know unless you were getting the lab tests and then an ultrasound. But all those things can make you GLP-1 deficient. And so, step one is are there ways that we could start to restore this naturally? Because we know that protein and fiber raise GLP-1, exercise raises GLP-1, but what's happened here where people can no longer hear this, where they're not getting these signals that not only help with satiety, but also, and in a couple different ways, like the neuro, there's basically stomach satiety and brain satiety. They're two different things, and they both work in both ways, but they also work overall with inflammation and insulin sensitivity and pushing out a little bit of insulin to lower blood sugar. Like there's so many things. So that was the first question. Second question was, all right, so there obviously, like when you get to that point of metabolic dysfunction, you can't hear it anymore. So the protein, the fiber, the exercise will take a while for gut rehab for that to work. What else could work here? Turns out And Rick Johnson's actually on the advisory board for this. So is David Perlmutter. So is Ben Bickman. So is Dom D'Agostino. I mean, powerhouse of researchers are on RX Sugar's advisory board. Turns out allulose in a 10 to 15 gram dose raises GLP-1. It's so powerful that you can take allulose and eat a candy bar and lower your blood sugar because it causes a release of insulin. So that's the first thing. It's like, well, that's super cool. Maybe we should get rid of the other sugars and just use allulose that's actually therapeutic. There's also a supplement out of New Zealand that New Zealand government did 10 years worth of research on, $30 million on this hops product that they patented that will raise GLP-1, where allulose will raise it for like when you eat protein, exercise, have fiber. This is a couple minutes, right? Allulose, a little bit longer. This CaloCurb product, couple hours, whereas a GLP-1 agonist will just keep it up and around. And I think the challenge with the drugs the way they are versus the peptides the way they should be used is that they're using a sledgehammer instead of bringing a dose up slightly, working on gut rehab, getting people on protein, fiber, and exercise, and starting to get your body to be able to do these things naturally, and using other things like allulose and CaloCurb so you could use the least amount of these things. So you don't have the big side effects that happen because you're using a sledgehammer when you just needed to use maybe like a nail file, So I think these are like a major longevity peptide. I think what's happening is we're using it as a sledgehammer drug and creating a whole bunch of problems and then going, oh, they're going to have to be on it for life. But if you took someone, used this in a lower therapeutic dose, got them to a point where now they're moving, eating protein, getting fiber in, using allulose, rehabbing their gut, getting insulin sensitive again, which of course sleep and resistance training can help, and then seeing what dose they really need. Maybe there'll be a point like with my son, I'm going to cycle him for like, he doesn't take it every week. We low dose cycle him to keep all these benefits. And that's where I think these things are really interesting and have huge impact. And I think whenever we have a thing like this, we have to ask the question, why is it working? And are there other things we can do?
A lot of great info there. And the piece you brought up towards the end about having to be on it for life is one of the things I've heard and one of the concerns when it comes to the drug use like Ozempic. Do you know a lot about that piece? You touched on it quickly, but for somebody that's using it for, say, 6 months a year as a drug, are they breaking their metabolism and can they get that back?
Well, see, I think that they have a broken metabolism and they can use this to heal their metabolism. And I think that's the challenge. I'm on thyroid and I'll be on thyroid for life. I'm on estrogen. I'll be on estrogen for life. My son was going to have to be on blood pressure medication for life. Now he doesn't because of this. He'll be on this cycling likely for life. I'd rather have him be on a low dose cycling peptide than on medications, right? So I think we have to pick these things, but I think we're using it wrong. You've got someone with a damaged metabolism. They're super insulin resistant, if not outright diabetic. I've got a doctor using this here in Florida, Dr. Lisa Coates. She is reversing insulin dependent diabetics. Now, would you rather be an insulin dependent diabetic on insulin for life or be on a low dose of a peptide and use that cycling at a low dose for life? I know which I would pick, right? And so would you have to be on it for life? It really depends on how much you can rehab your body, where it is. Right now, it's broken. If you can get that person, like right now, I'm working with someone who started about 386 pounds. He's 369 pounds. He was moving 2,500 steps a day and with low testosterone. And the first thing the doctors wanted to do was put him on testosterone. I go, but if you look at his age and you look at the step count, you become hypogonadal if you're moving less than 4,000 steps a day. He's insulin resistant with low step counts. Why don't we fix those things and see if it comes up, right? But I know that I have to repair him. Like, he needs to be able to move again. He needs to be able to, like, we're working on his eating, his sleeping. So, so what this is helping do is shut down some of the noise, helping someone make better choices so that we can heal their metabolism and then go, is this something you'll need to cycle, or is this something you won't need to use? Depends how far gone your metabolism is. But the other side is your polypharmacy. You're using all these other things. This could help you to the point where you don't need to use any of those other things. And you maybe just have to use a low dose of a compounded pharmacy peptide, which, by the way, is not expensive. The expense is the drug company with the high dose, where they have a patent on the little pen that you use. So they're using these high doses of the stuff. So, I mean, to me, it's all still the same thing. We're trying to get to a point where we can heal someone's metabolism, get them insulin sensitive, get them doing the right things. And then we see what are, like, so they can use a minimum of any things they might have to use, whether it's hormones or drugs. That's what your goal really should be with any of these types of things.
To me, it seems like we're still in the early phases. There's a lot of gray here because of questions like, does somebody need to take this for life? Things like the allulose coming into the picture and maybe being side effect free or less side effects.
There's no side
Where
effects with allulose, by the way.
that's great. Where
And
this becomes tricky, I'll let you finish here in a sec, is somebody that could have and would have reversed their insulin resistance and their metabolic health through things like a ketogenic low carb diet, and they decide to take something like this as an easy way out without having tried all those things first, and then they're stuck on it for life. And then that could turn into a polypharmacy type thing.
yeah,
So I'm just playing devil's advocate, where I think we need to be really careful about these things because we know things like type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, they are reversible. And we have prescriptive diet and lifestyle plans that can predictably take most people from point A to point B if they're willing to follow it. So a lot of gray, but there is that perspective as well.
and in a perfect world, we would never have gotten to this mess. We would have no ultra processed food. And in a perfect world, anyone going on one of these peptides would not be able to go on it. And by the way, I know the doctors who are doing it this way, where you have to do a DEXA scan, you have to do resistance training, you have to eat protein. You're eating a low carb, protein forward diet. Like, then it makes a ton of sense. And I know doctors doing that are able to get people to use this, cycle down, and get off of them and maintain all their muscle mass, because it turns out the peptides also can lower myostatin and actually help you hold on to or build muscle. So that whole muscle loss that you're hearing is actually because they're on a crappy diet without resistance training. Like, I don't think these things should be used unless you are going to be monitored and you're going to track your food and you're going to track your body composition. But I know that the doctor here that I was telling you about in Florida with the insulin resistant, the type 2 diabetics on insulin, they already were on the diet. Like, they were already on the exercise and they still were on insulin. And this was what allowed them to reverse that because of the regenerative effects of it. And that's the interesting piece, is the regenerative effects of this. And if it can do that, like some of these other peptides can do too. Like right now I have a torn elbow tendon from a luggage injury, and I had Prolo or PRP, but I'm also using BPC 157, right? So these peptides are regenerative. And if they're regenerative, then it should be able to be at a point where you don't have to use these anymore because you healed. That's the fingers crossed piece of it. And then the other part is, well, what if we could do it with this supplement or this allulose? And again, those are things that anybody could use. So,
Have you tried the allulose with yourself or your son?
oh yeah. So my son has allulose. He uses allulose. We use allulose every day. I've been playing around with Calikerb. For me, the reason I'm looking at all these things is for the joint, since having big joint problems from, blowing out a knee at 17. I'm always looking at anything that can help with joint health and osteoarthritis and inflammation. I'm all in for. So I use allulose every day. My challenge with allulose is I don't have a sweet tooth. So it's sweet. So I'm always trying to figure out how I'm going to use it because I'm like, ugh, I'd always rather have salty than sweet.
If you enjoyed that clip, you're going to want to head over here and catch a full episode. I'll see you over there.
This idea that you cannot build muscle as you age is absolutely ridiculous and wrong. And I actually am stronger and more powerful at 61 than I was at 25. I am in better shape now than I was then.